From the Royal Oak Studios of Podcast Detroit, welcome to your Daily Detroit for Thursday, April 4th, 2019. I'm Jer Stays. Today's episode talks about the mobility industry in Detroit. There are numerous startups, and the big players are serious about it with a lot of money getting spent. After all, that new Ford campus that's happening in Corktown, that's about developing this kind of technology right here in Detroit. Mobility and transit issues are also very real where we live. We touch on the challenges everyday people have around those issues in a city and region that frankly will never have something like a subway. That conversation, led by Sven Gustafsson, is with Glenn Stevens. Glenn is the executive director of Mish Auto. That's an initiative of the Detroit Regional Chamber. And despite being the head of something called, Mish Auto, you might be surprised that his answers to the challenges and opportunities Metro Detroit has is not just to add more cars to the road. We'll jump into that conversation recorded at the Detroit Policy Conference right after this. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Milo Digital. Milo Digital is a full-service digital marketing agency that engineers quality results through data and innovative strategies. Learn more at milodetroit.com.
Glenn, it's 2019. In the city of Detroit, we've got all these new scooter companies. We've got the Mogo Bike Share. What's missing from the mobility mix? That's your wheelhouse.
Well, there's a lot of things missing, but I also look at that as opportunity. I mean, one of the things we're missing and we're not going to have is a subway system. I mean, a mass infrastructure, underground, above ground system, that's something that Detroit never had, and that's a whole nother show, but we don't have that and we won't ever have that. Will there be more light rail in the future? I don't know. Let's hope there is. So we have to work with what we have, the different intermodal forms of transportation that exist today, and how we connect those together and to solve these problems. And so that's both a challenge and an opportunity for a place that has 138 square miles, just the city.
What are you seeing? You work with companies all the time, startups, established companies, everything. I mean, what's the energy right now? Where's the focus in this sector, in mobility?
Yeah, well, I think the energy is with everybody. And what I mean by everybody is, let's use that word, it's a little bit overused, but let's use the ecosystem word. So let's look at transportation. So now, today, tech companies, OEMs, suppliers, technology service firms, and then all these new incubating startup organizations that have mobility transportation solutions, they're all part of the mix. And the good news is that's all happening here in Detroit. So when you look at what's new, for example, and I don't know if you guys have been, I think you've been over to the landing zone, to the WeWork. Have you been there? Yeah.
I've been there, yeah.
Yeah, you've been over, that's right. So we have 30 mobility startups incubating there, along with around the corner, the Techstars, which has moved. So you've got a lot of density of new technology for mobility startups happening in Detroit that's interacting with the rest of the ecosystem. And you're seeing more and more VC money coming in, so it's bubbling. And I think it's gonna continue to break, and that's a big focus for us.
So I always think that this term mobility is a little bit nebulous and vague and everything. Give us some examples of some exciting kind of forward-thinking, businesses. What are people doing? What kinds of ideas are out there?
That is about the broadest word you could ever use, but it is the word. And it's interesting that we used to use that word, and we still do, to describe people who had challenges with physical handicaps or things like that, and they needed mobility solutions. We still use it for that, but now we've broadened the use of the word to say, how do people, goods, and data and services move more efficiently in a world that has more friction? What I mean by friction, you've got hyper-urbanization, scarcity of resources, and things going on in the world, and demographic shifts where new mobility solutions need to come to work. So when you look at it that broadly, you can imagine that there's everything from cybersecurity to autonomous vehicle development. I mean, we all know about at least we do here, but maybe your listeners don't, the May Mobility shuttles in downtown Detroit.
Yeah, the driverless bus.
Yeah, so it's an automated shuttle, electric vehicle that is shuttling Bedrock employees and Quicken Loan employees from their parking lots down to work. They're going to expand to Columbus, they're expanding to Grand Rapids. That's bubbled out of this system here, particularly in Ann Arbor. But we've got, different people who are looking at different types of applications for ride sharing and tying different intermodal forms of communication together and mobility solutions. So it's just incredible what's going on right now, because here's why. I'll put it in the context of two numbers. The global auto industry right now is seen as like a $3 trillion industry. But if you look at personal mobility in a shared use economy, that's projected to be $6, $7, $8, $10 trillion out in the next couple decades. So the economic opportunity, as well as the ability to solve global pollution, scarcity of resources, hyper-urbanization issues, that's there too. It's pretty exciting times.
Plus the whole, we keep hearing that millennials aren't particularly fond of the personal car ownership model, et cetera, right?
Yeah, I mean, you look at any place in the world right now, whether it be in Helsinki or Shanghai or Detroit, people want to live and work differently and move differently. And so the notion of being car-free or car-light, it's not a notion anymore. It's a way of living. And like Devin that works on our team, he doesn't have a car. And he can get to where he needs to get to go. He can take a scooter downtown. He can do Uber or Lyft to get out to the suburbs. And if he wants to go up north, he can do Maven. Or Zipcar or something like that. So that's the way it's working today, and that's a choice.
So I mean, we're in Detroit. We're Motown, Motor City, the big three, Detroit 3, whatever you want to call them now. But I mean, so is mobility for those companies, for Ford, Chrysler, Fiat Chrysler, GM, is this an opportunity? Is it a threat? Somewhere in between?
It's all of the above. Yeah. So look at Ford. So they build an F-150 every 53 seconds, and they sell a lot of them, and they make a lot of them, and it's an incredible vehicle. So they got a foot firmly in the presence to run their company, to deliver shareholder value. But because the world is changing and all the things we just talked about, they have to figure out how do we take part in this mobility as a service revolution that's going on. So it's a threat if you don't change. It's definitely a threat. It's an opportunity if you determine how I'm going to be not a victim of the inflection point called mobility, but take the upward trajectory on it. Then it's an opportunity. And I actually feel pretty good about the hometown companies and the way they're looking at the world and the way it's changing around them.
We hear a lot of talk about, and you talk about May Mobility, the driverless shuttles. We hear a lot of talk about autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars. You talk with these companies that are making them and everything. What's your view of how far away we really are from that? I mean, are we hearing a lot of rosy projections about when this technology is going to be ready for real world?
Well, and Gardner puts this out. There's a hype curve, right? And there's a lot more hype than reality on today. So somebody said to me the other day, we were looking at they were a policymaker, and they said, well, gosh, we'll be able to use autonomous vehicles in Detroit to solve solutions really quickly. And I said, not really quickly. Okay, we're on a progression. The ability for us to have fully autonomous level 5 zipping all over the place, we're a long way from that. It's an incremental step process, and technology works that way. But right now, it has the opportunity to make the roads more safe. I mean, look at the number of pedestrian fatalities. The number's going up like crazy right now. So technology is going to help us solve that problem, just like it is for traffic fatalities and congestion issues. So we're dealing with a little bit of the overhype, but we're dealing with the reality that the market has huge opportunity in this mobility as a service market, and we need to solve problems. So technology can help do that.
All right, so Glenn, last question is the same one that we're asking everybody here today. We're talking about Detroit 2030. What is your vision, your crystal ball, aspirational vision around mobility for the city of Detroit in 2030?
So we have been working with the mayor's office for about 3 years now. We have a group that meets. We call it the Detroit Mobility Solutions Coalition, long name, but that's what it is. And we just get together when we need to pull all the players together to share where the developments are going on. So for the city of Detroit, you got two issues, and they're very unique. So you got the downtown core, which is 7.2 square miles. Those are first world problems. Where to park, right? How do I get my scooter? In the neighborhoods, the 130 other square miles, those are rest of world problems. I hate the phrase third world problems. I just can't stand it, so I use rest of world. But they're dealing with, how do I get to school? How do I get to healthcare? How do I get to education? So I would love to see a city where the access to that transportation is something that people feel comfortable with, that it's available to them, that it's their right to have, so they can have personal economic growth and the communities can grow. And the ability to do that, and for us to be able to help do that as an auto industry, as a technology players, I mean, that's where we need to go, because we won't have true opportunity for people unless they can get to the places where they need to have, and they have the education to be able to do what they need to do. And that's kind of what my vision is.
All right. Glenn Stevens, thanks so much.
Yeah, man. That's always good to talk to you guys. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks for listening. If you love the show, consider supporting us as a patron at patreon.com/Daily Detroit. For Sven, Cheyenne, and the team, as well as the folks here at Podcast Detroit, I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit.
You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.